Good evening, everyone. I'm calling to session the next budget meeting. I'm going to start off with the town and city clerk vital records. Is your microphone on?
Okay. My name is Kelly Billadou. I'm the assistant town clerk, and tonight I'll be presenting the 2015-2016 budget for the town and city clerk's office and vital records. John Bazzano, the town clerk, couldn't be here tonight. He's the host clerk for the IIMC Municipal Clerks Conference that's coming to Hartford. Attendees are arriving as early as today and will be here through next week enjoying our city. I'm going to start with the town and city clerk vital records mission. The mission of the town and city clerk is to keep the most up-to-date and accurate official land and legislative records as required by state statutes in order to serve and support the city council, residents of Hartford, and the general public with accurate and timely information. The total budget for the clerk and vital records office is $821,643 for the fiscal year 2015-2016. This is a slight increase due to contractual wage increases. We also will be receiving a historic documents preservation program grant in the amount of $6,500 from the Connecticut State Library. The office generates about $2 million in revenue per year. To highlight some 2014-2015 achievements, there's e-recording. Land record documents can now be recorded electronically. This is at no cost to the city. Also, again, the 2015 International Institute of Municipal Clerks is holding their conference in Hartford starting today. The conference actually starts on Sunday and will go through Wednesday. John Bazzano, the town clerk, again, is the host clerk for the conference, and we will be attracting over 900 clerks from all over the world. They are approximating this will generate about $3 million in revenue for the city. 3 hotels have been sold out for the conference, and restaurants and venues all over the city have been booked for gatherings throughout the conference. Another highlight for us is the conveyance tax. At this time, we have collected over $1 million in conveyance tax from the transfer of properties. We have exceeded our projections and still have about a month and a half left in our fiscal year to increase this revenue. Some goals for 2015 and 2016 are continuation of preservation and management of Hartford's historic documents and to make them available to the public. This will be accomplished by using the Historic Documents Preservation Program grant funds. We will continue working with our legislative delegation to increase fees and revenues to the city. The Connecticut Town Clerks Association has a government affairs committee that works hard to bring these recommendations to the legislature on behalf of the town clerks across the state. We will also continue converting permanent records to digital images for preservation and instantaneous retrieval. Another goal is to restore birth, marriage, and death record books. Older books will be restored to preserve the books as well as the records inside these books. Just going to go over some of the duties and responsibilities of the town and city clerk's office as well as the vital records office. We provide clerical staffing and support service for the Court of Common Council. We maintain records for all boards and commissions, maintain and prepare Court of Common Council minutes, certification of municipal documents, administer oaths of office, recording and indexing of all city land records, issuing dog licenses, recording military discharges. We keep notary, justice of the peace, and municipal campaign finance records. We perform a variety of election-related duties, including the issuance of absentee ballots and preparation of state election reports. We ensure that we are in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act. We issue applicable certificates and permits: birth, marriages, death, adoptions, domestic partnerships, burials, liquor permits, and trade name registrations. We also sell sporting licenses and offer notary public services. This is the end of our presentation, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman De Jesus.
Good evening. I have a question concerning one that I posed to the Chief of Police about the animal control. Is there, can you provide us with some statistics on how many people are registering their pets in the city? You don't have to probably do that now. That's probably hard to kind of answer, but if you have a ballpark, that would be great. But if you can submit that in writing to kind of see what is the pet population in the city due to the escalating costs for the city for that service.
I actually can answer that question now. We average about 500 dog registrations per year. Compared to most towns, we're at a very low registration rate. We have been trying to get out the word better. We do send out reminders each year. We're just trying to get out the word that dogs are required to be licensed. We try our best to work with the police department in regards to the licensing.
Just to reiterate, what is the benefit of someone registering their pet? What is the benefit to the city?
As they say, the dog tag is your key to getting your dog back if the dog goes missing. There's a connection there. On the other side, it also ensures the health of all animals. You're required to have a rabies certification to get a dog license. You're welcome.
Councilman Deutsch.
All right, thank you, through the chair. The city is going to the dogs, isn't it? Sorry, okay. Listen, just this little question. Key goals, it talks about preservation and management of Hartford's historic documents and all that stuff. Is that in coordination with the public library where they have that third floor room also that does that stuff?
A lot of the records have been moved out of our vault, archived by the archival aide, and moved to the Hartford History Room.
That's what I thought. So that's a good thing, isn't it?
It's a great thing.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Thanks, that's all.
Any further questions? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't have a schedule with me, but next on my pile of paperwork is internal audit. I saw a Pat jump up. Ah, yeah, it's me. Come on up.
All set?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, council members, colleagues, and everybody else in attendance. I am, for those of you who may not know me, I am Patrick Campbell, the Chief Auditor. I'm here this evening to present to you the Internal Audit Department's budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016. I also have here with me the Chairman of the Internal Audit Commission, Kyle Bergquist. I don't know if he wants to say anything at this time or if he would like to wait until the end of my presentation.
I'll let you go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next slide. These are the areas that we will be covering during the presentation. That includes the Internal Audit Department legal mandate, areas of responsibility, the Internal Audit Department staff, department performance and results, the mayor's recommended budget, the Internal Audit Commission's requested budget, and the Internal Audit Department's coverage of high risk and exposure areas. Moving on to the next slide. The Internal Audit Department performs our duties in accordance with Article 2, Section 241 of the Municipal Code. And that references that there shall be an Internal Audit Commission and Internal Audit Unit that shall be a department of the City of Hartford. The Commission and Department shall conduct independent examinations and evaluations of city financial activities to assure the integrity, efficiency, and efficacy of the government of the city, including the Board of Education. Next slide. The areas we are responsible for auditing include the City of Hartford, the Hartford Public School System, the Hartford Parking Authority, the Hartford Public Library, the Municipal Employees Retirement Fund, otherwise known as the MRF, grants, funded programs, agencies, and other entities. These operations constitute more than $1 billion in revenue and expenses. We will also be adding the Hartford Stadium Authority in operations to our auditable areas for next fiscal year. And as a matter of fact, we've already started doing some work on that area. We've been working with representatives from the Development Services Department and actually the developer group to look at the process for reviewing and approving the construction-related invoices. So, needless to say, this is a significant and wide-ranging areas, or these are significant and wide-ranging areas of responsibility as far as the requirement of auditing is concerned. Moving on to the next slide. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Internal Audit Department staff. We have 5 full-time professional employees, including a chief auditor, deputy chief auditor, and 3 staff auditors. This group of individuals has a significant number of years of audit-related experience in various types of businesses. Each employee holds at least one financial audit certification. This includes certified public accountant, certified internal auditor, or certified fraud examiner designations. Each of these certifications require 40 hours of continuing professional education credits per year. And that's something that I want you to remember when I talk a little bit about our individual, our specific line items in our budget. Some employees also hold master's degrees in related fields. And we have no administrative or support staff. All of our employees, including myself, do all job-related tasks from making copies, performing individual audit tasks, and writing reports. I'd like to move on to the next slide then. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Internal Audit Department's production and output. So we primarily perform planned risk-based audits, and we also do special projects and reviews generated internally or by request from various sources. Through these activities, we identify actual and potential cost savings and revenue enhancements, improve operational policies, procedures, and controls, provide support and consulting services to management, detect, investigate, and prevent fraud. And I would like to note that a key component to preventing fraud is having a significant audit presence known to employees, which I believe we do. Moving on to the next slide, I'd like to point out that this slide shows the Internal Audit Department's performance over the last 3 years and our plans for next fiscal year. So we generally try to, or we plan to perform at least 20 planned audits per year. And you'll note that that's on the first line there. Year over year, we have been increasing the number of audits that we perform with the same staff level. And next year, we are increasing the amount of planned audits to, by 1 to 21. And then we also do a number of planned, unplanned special projects and reviews. Generally, we do 30 to 35 of these. So in total, we produce 50 to 56 projects, or complete 50 to 56 projects overall on a year-to-year basis. And that's in addition to all this other consulting reports or consulting work that we do that might not necessarily result in a report or any memorandum or any other reportable activity, most of which you see in our monthly activity reports. Another goal of the Internal Audit Department is to be at least cost neutral to the city, or in other words, to identify cost savings and revenue enhancements that are equal to or greater than the cost of our budget. And you'll note at the bottom there that we have done this on a consistent year-over-year basis and have done that for as many years as I've been here. For your information, I've attached a more detailed report of the activities that we've done or the activities we've performed to date this year, and you'll see that we've completed 15 audit reports and I believe 24 special projects and reviews. We do expect to meet our goals of 50 to 55 projects overall for this fiscal year also. At this point, I'd like to move on to the next slide, which shows the mayor's recommended budget for the Internal Audit Department. You'll note that essentially it's made up of primarily of our salaries, with a small component of non-personnel funding for some other area, for some other requirements that we have. The total of that non-personnel funding is $3,700. And I'd like to note that the year-over-year budgets have been essentially flat, with the exception of minimal amounts for salary increases. We believe that this $3,700 is really insufficient to effectively and efficiently run the Internal Audit Department. I'd like to also point out that of that $3,700, $2,400 of that is for our internal audit software licensing fee. So that leaves us with about, I believe, $1,300 or so for discretionary spending on other items, supplies, and anything else that we might need to operate our budget. I'd like to point out that we do get some funding provided to us at our request from the Management and Budget Department for training and other expenses, but that's on a request basis. And again, I think it's something that we believe should be in our budget, and we should have included in our budget to maintain our independence and to adequately perform our duties on a year-to-year basis. So that being said, and realizing that the city's budget challenges and constraints are significant at this time, we feel it would be remiss on our part not to express the need for and ask for additional funding to meet basic audit coverage requirements. And you'll see that our submitted budget is on the next page, and that total is $592,000 compared to the $483,000 recommended by the mayor. And what this additional funding represents is a request for an additional auditor position to provide for better than a 5-year or 5 to 6 year audit coverage cycle, which I'll talk a little bit about later on the next slide. And then it's for additional non-personnel funding, which will bring us back to a level that we had at, you'll see in the year 2012, which was about $23,000. And that'll provide for meaningful and appropriate training for staff. Primarily, it constitutes costs associated with all the associations that we're affiliated with and the training that we require. As I previously mentioned, the 40 hours of training required per auditor per year. And again, I think that this funding will provide for the necessary level of independence for the internal audit department, which I think was intended when the department was established in the last changing or the changing of the municipal code to provide independence from the administration. So that being said, I'd like to also note that many things are or will be changing throughout the city operations with consolidation, potential consolidations, downsizings, new initiatives like the baseball stadium and authority, a recent change from the munis tax system to the quality data services system. So there's a lot of things going on, and with changes such as these, you need additional diligence as far from an audit standpoint to provide the adequate coverage that would be appropriate, that we believe is appropriate, which I'll talk about on the next slide. So you'll see this slide talks a little bit about our ability to cover what we consider to be the areas necessary to audit on a year-to-year basis. In the first column, you'll note that there's 147 areas subject to audit that we feel are deserve a high enough priority that we should be looking at those areas on a 3-year cycle. In 2013-2014, we looked at 22 of those, and over the last 3-year cycle, 2012 to 2014, we've managed to look at about 66 of those, which is about 45%. So we're looking at about half as many what we believe and what is the industry standard as far as the coverage is concerned. So we're supposed to be looking at these higher priorities on a 3-year cycle. We're looking at them on a 5 to 6 year cycle. So with an additional staff person, we would get not necessarily up to the 100% level, but we would get much closer to the industry standard of a 3-year cycle for looking at these areas, these areas. In addition, hopefully, we would be able to reduce, but there's no guarantee, reduce the number of special projects and reviews that we do that would allow us to spend more time on our audit areas, our planned audit areas. And we're also, as you saw before, we're improving our production and on a year-over-year basis. So the combination of those 3 things should get us closer to where we need to be from a coverage standpoint is concerned. So again, we realize the difficulty and challenges there would be with providing another staff person, but we believe that it's necessary given the circumstances. Also like to note that the longer the cycle for audit coverage, the greater potential for problems to occur without being identified and corrected, which just goes without saying for the most part. So in closing, we would like your consideration for and support for the increases in our budget for the areas we noted, and like to thank you for your opportunity to present the budget to you. And I open up for any questions or comments that you may have.
Councilman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Good afternoon, Mr. Campbell. Just had a quick question for you, and I hope I don't answer my own question, but it seems like going to your projected budget, you went up on mileage and travel allowance. In 2012, it was $225, and you're requesting $1,000 in 2016. Is that because of the addition of the extra auditor that you're asking for? Is that why they went up substantially?
I think also we found that our budget has been, the cost associated with that has been greater than actual than what we budgeted. So the combination of the two would require that increase.
And just a second question to follow up to that, mileage and travel. Are we doing is that a part of the training staff services too? That all encompass each other?
Yes, yep. And then just also, I don't personally charge mileage, but when people have to drive around town, the staff people, they will typically charge for the mileage to do that. I think that's something that they have, I guess, the ability to do, and they do it, so.
You have utilization of a city vehicle?
No, we do not.
You
No.
do not?
No, we use our own personal vehicles. So we charge mileage for that. Or the staff does. Again, I don't, and the deputy doesn't, but the staff in many cases will do that. And then, you know, again, if we do some local training, we'll go down to Meriden. Lots of times the CPA center is in Meriden. They'll drive back and forth to Meriden, and then they'll charge mileage for that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Councilman Deutsch?
Oh, and thank you, through the chair. Did you say, here, a couple questions. Did you say that one of the auditable areas among agencies will be the Stadium Authority?
Yes.
Good. And what about the Registrar of Voters Office?
We have that. That is on our plan. It's not one of our higher priorities. That would be more. We typically do our audits on a financial basis. That's something we can look at from an operational standpoint, and we just haven't done that in the past. But that's something we can do. It is on our plan, but it's on the lower end of our plan because it might not derive a significant amount of cost savings if we look at that. It might provide some operational improvements, but again, it's on the lower end of our scale for doing audits.
But so finally, through you going back to my first question on the Stadium Authority, that would be at the upper end of the scale.
That would be, yes, that would be at the very high, especially again, since it's a new operation,
yes.
It's a new area for review. It's something that we would be putting at the very high, and actually we'll probably be looking at some aspect of that, and we'll include it on our plan next fiscal year, if in fact we do not get to actually doing some work on that in this current fiscal year.
So that in itself might justify for us in City Council an extra staff person.
Well, that's one component of it. As I indicated, there's many other areas that could potentially change through changes, consolidations of operations, and new systems. Another new system that I didn't mention is the timekeeping system that's going to be implemented. And my understanding was it was supposed to be implemented at this time, and I'm not sure. Perhaps my colleagues behind me could answer that better, but they're implementing a new timekeeping system based on, thumbprint technology, and we'll have to look at that and how that's being accounted for. And so that's another area that's on the horizon that we're going to have to add to our auditable areas and look at in the very near future.
So thank you very much. I'm just trying to elicit giving you staff that is sufficient for the tasks at hand.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Jennings?
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Could you please give us some specific examples of high-risk and exposure areas?
Yes. Well, there's some key ones, obviously. The tax collector's office. Pretty much anything in the finance department is a high-risk and exposure area. They're dealing with cash, finances, but let's talk a little bit about the tax collector's office. They obviously collect a significant portion of the city's revenue that goes through that office. They have three different areas that we look at. We look at the real estate operations separately, we look at the personal property operations separately, and we look at the motor vehicle operations separately. And then we just look at the cash controls component of that also. Because of that, it's such a high priority area, we look at one of those areas every single year. So that it's something that we need to do and need to keep on top of. So we do it essentially on a 3-year cycle. We look at real estate, personal property, and motor vehicles. Each time we look at one of those areas, we look at the cash controls associated with them too, and system controls and things along those lines. Actually, you should have received an announcement letter from us indicating that we're going to be looking at the real estate property component of the tax collector's office. We're starting that review right now, and as I mentioned before, one of the things we'll be keying in on is the whole transition from the Munis tax module to the new Quality Data Services tax module that occurred in the last fiscal year. That they had some, they had some problems as they do with many transitions between systems, but we'll be looking closely at that too. So I can continue on. So that tax collector's office is significant. A lot of the other areas, revenue management within the finance department, the treasurer's office. You have the investment management operations over there. You have the pension operations, and where they're paying hundreds of millions of dollars in pension payments. So we look at those areas, the control over the cash in that operation also. And then all of the other areas where they collect cash. The previous operation, Town and City Clerk's Office, they have 2 cash collection areas there. The Development Services operation, their Licenses Inspection Division, there's a significant area where they collect cash there. Health and Human Services, are the Human Resources Department, benefit payments. We look at that on a regular basis to make sure that people are eligible to receive the benefits and they're in the right, they're paying the contributions they should be paying. So I can go on, but those are some of the key high-risk areas that come to mind. And every year, and I'll be doing this in the next month or so, you'll receive my analysis of auditable areas that lays it out by department. And what we do is we rank them, prioritize them from 1 to 3, 1 being the highest, 2 the next level, and 3 the lowest level. And then it shows how we look at that on a year-to-year basis to make sure that we're providing the best coverage we can, given the resources that we have.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, one last question. Has the Internal Audit Department identified any significant fraud or monies, recovered significant monies on behalf of the taxpayers of this city, or at least prevented losses by making recommendations that would tighten up our departments?
Well, we do, essentially every time we issue an audit report, we're making recommendations to improve policies and procedures and controls. And we have worked on a number of fraud-related issues, both at the city and the board. So, as I indicated before, we identify things through our audits, but also the presence, I think, of a strong, as I indicated before, a strong audit function, and them knowing that we're here and we're looking at things helps to act as a deterrence to fraud.
Thank you. One final question. In the event that you find fraud occurring, what is the procedure that the Internal Audit Department engages in order to address the fraud?
We have, there's a city fraud policy that's, I can share with you, and it speaks to the process that we go through. We work with the departments, we work with the Corporation Counsel's Office, we work with the police department as deemed necessary, and we could even escalate it from there to the state or any other authorities that we feel are necessary. But we do have specific policies in place that we follow when we identify fraud. And I can send out a copy of that. When I get back to my office tomorrow morning, I'll send out a copy of that to everybody.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman De Jesus.
Evening. So I have questions on, specifically on line item of general office supplies. It could be a way of how everything is being put into that line item, but that line item was budgeted for $524, and the actual amount there right now is $2,995. Is this going to be how? And then you have other line items that there's actually no budgeting for. Who does your accounting, or who organizes your accounts? Is it you just send the bill to finance, or how does that work?
No, we generally pay for most of our expenses through our
P-card.
P-card,
Yeah,
yep.
that's the way, yeah.
And so what you'll see here is lots of times what we set up these, as I indicated before, it's sort of a exercise in, somewhat of an exercise in futility. But you'll notice that for this year we have 3 line items in our budget, non-personnel budget. But what we'll do is we'll charge expenses, and then we work with the management and budget department to essentially reallocate those expenses to some other accounts. So we will charge them initially. It's like a flow-through account to a certain degree, because in essence, when we pay for these expenses, we're in effect lots of times going over budget, and then they have to be reallocated to some other account, either training or some technology or some other centralized account through assistance with management and budget, which we appreciate very much. But it's sort of to say that we're only going to be spending $3,700 on non-personnel expenses. It's not the case. You know, it's much more than that.
So line item 561001 is a flow. It's a 051. It's just an account that everything just gets put into, and then at the end of the year you distribute it.
Well, no, not well.
That's the one that is over.
Well, if you're looking at, are you looking at the 2055?
I'm looking at this year's budget. Yeah.
Well,
There's 500 that was allocated, and there is 2,995 that was actually spent.
let me see. I'm missing something here. And you're looking at this year's
Budget. Yeah, I mean, I got bills. The bills that I'm looking at is 1031, it's
Oh,
1231.
okay, so you're looking at our current budget. I don't have that in front of me
Okay.
right here. So, but yeah, so a lot of, well, and those are mostly probably, I would think, if it's office supplies, those are in fact office supplies that we've spent money on this year. So,
Yeah,
but you'll also see through that there's expenses in other categories too that we probably are not included in our budget. And again, those will be reallocated to other areas.
Yeah, because my concern is that it's a little confusing to kind of understand, because you got Secretary of State bills here, and you have National Association of Governors and Audits, or Governing Audits, and then Institute of Internal Auditors,
Right.
the CSCPA.
But they shouldn't be in our supplies budget. Those should be in our professional.
And that's the line item that I'm talking about.
Oh,
that
I'm
is
sorry.
over budget.
Okay, yeah, so those are all our association dues, and again, you won't see that as a line item in our budget because we don't get allocated for
Right,
funds to do
but
that.
you're not using the other tax and professional services line item at all. There is nothing that has been expended for those $2,400 dollars you haven't
Right,
expended in that
because
line
that's an
item.
annual expense, and we pay that at the year end. And that's a one expense item, because as I indicated before, that is the annual fee for our audit software, and we pay it at year end. And actually, it's going to be more than that this year. So we wouldn't have charged anything to that account because we haven't paid the bill yet.
Okay, so you are overspending currently.
We
in
are,
that-
and we have typically done that on a year-over-year basis, and either our aggregate budget through payroll savings for whatever reason has covered certain expenses, or as I indicated, they've been reallocated at year end to other accounts with our assistance from management and budget.
So before you spend the money, do you contact, I think I just want to confirm this, may have said this, you confirm with the, because some of these fees are $235 and you
Right.
budget $524. With two of these fees, I see 3. With 2 of them, you're already over budget. Do you speak with management and budget and say, listen, we're going to go over on this funds, or how does this work? Because that's a significant number.
Yeah, and we do that on a regular basis. I mean, we work with management and budget on an ongoing basis, and I'd like to also say that in aggregate, we never go over our budget, and I think that's an important consideration. So at year end, we've never exceeded our budget. we've been within our budget. So we may temporarily exceed a line item, but in aggregate for our budget as a whole, we don't go over our budget.
All right. Yeah, for my eye, it just looks a little bit different, and I just hope that...
And again, I agree, because
we don't.
and that's why I am asking to get the funding level, I think, in our budget that I think we need to spend, and so that we have control over that, rather than trying to having to spend in an account that we don't have any funds in, and then have it worked out after the fact with the management and budget department.
You're saying that we're under budget, you're under budgeted, the amount, and you're asking for us to increase it to where you at right now, or what your actual spending looks like.
Yes, yeah, again, I think I'd like to try to go back to our 2000 and I believe it was 2012 funding level, and so we can spend what we feel is necessary to provide the requirements from training standpoint and certification standpoint, and just to do what we need to do on a year-over-year basis to effectively operate our department. I think $3,700 is just not adequate, and that's just, maybe it's just me, but that's what I believe that's the case, and I think that the fact that we have to sort of move things around and temporarily overcharge budget line item budgets, that sort of is proof positive of that.
Right. The other question is, can you go through the process of what happens when you're submitting your budget? What did you submit this budget that you just submitted to us to the administration, the one with the 592?
Yes, we did. Yeah, we went through almost the exact same process with the administration when we had our budget meeting with them.
Okay, what was the justification for them to reduce the amount that you guys submitted?
Well, they want us to have, like every other department, either a flat or a reduced budget. So that's what they're holding us to. So we submitted something that we felt was what we needed, and they gave us what they felt they felt we needed, apparently.
I guess my last question is, can you carry me through through an audit process when you engage a department for an audit? Can you carry me through that process as to what information, is it all voluntary information that you guys are entitled to? Is it that they have to give you information? What information are you privy to, and what information you have problems acquiring from departments?
Well, according to the charter, we should, and for the most part, I believe, have access to any data in the city. And we generally don't have any problem getting that data from the departments. We have access to all the systems in the city. We do a majority of our work actually at our desks. We go into the system, we do our queries, we come up with our test samples. A lot of the data that support payments and all, that's also scanned in and online, so we can do a lot of that work. We don't have to go to a lot of the departments. So we have access to pretty much any data we want, and we never really have any problems with the departments when we request the information. They're very, very cooperative.
Concerning that issue, the City Council has just recently formed an audit commission, and we've had an auditor, an outside auditor, for about 4 or 5 years now. What has been your relationship with the outside auditor, and what recommendations will you give to improve, if there's any relationship, or what recommendations will you suggest for the council now that it's about 5 years? Typically, this is about the same time we transition to a new auditor. What recommendations would you suggest? I guess that's 2 questions in one.
Well, yeah, as far as the first part of that question is concerned, we issue all of our reports, all of the reports are copied to the external auditors. So they see everything, all the audit reports we issue, they get a copy of that and they do that. They're aware of that. We also meet with them on different projects. If we have if we have a concern or a question about certain things, we actually contact them. We, on the other hand, sometimes when they need information or data, they'll come to us and ask us for assistance. So it's a very cooperative relationship. And McGladrey is, we've worked very well with McGladrey over the years. As far as your relationship with McGladrey or any other audit entity is concerned, again, I think that during one of the last meetings that we had with the Council Audit Committee, you were sort of reaching out to them to have them sort of walk through the financial statements with them. And I think that that's something that might be helpful, just to get a better idea of what everything represents and how it's being accounted for, and maybe get some input from them as to things that you might want to spend your time on, or areas that you might want to concentrate your efforts on. So again, working with them and trying to get some feedback from them as to areas that that should be important to you.
Right, and I think with that said, many has said, I think it was the conversation started about 2 years ago about the new position for the new auditor at the in your department. Many have said that can you use the resources that the external auditor provides to kind of offset some of the projects that you're taking on that may be too time consuming for the current staff, and pass on some for the external auditor to take up some of that responsibility?
Well, a couple things relating to that. They're not going to pick up any additional work at no fee. So they could certainly probably provide some additional services that would assist us, but that's going to cost the city money, and a considerable amount of money at that, I would say. So I think it's a possibility, but I think that you get more bang for your buck through some additional resources in-house. They also do a different type of work than we do. They're primarily financial auditing. They don't do a lot of the operational auditing that we do. Not to say that they should be doing that. Their primary objective is to do the financial audit, not any operational audits or things along those lines. So we're sort of different types of audit functions, let's put it that way.
The other, I'm sorry, and this is problematic, as I said, the audit thing, and it's been huge. But the other issue that I've seen too is the amount of auditing has gone up. Mm-hmm. But I've seen that a lot of these audits are so small in so many different issues that it could be time consuming. How are you doing with distributing and what you take in, what is audible, what is not, what we put on hold, what we don't? Because I just find it to be, some audits, I read them, because I read almost all of them, and it's like, I guess, I think every audit is important, but some of them are like, do we really need to take the resources and allocate them for that audit when we could have probably focused on a major area of the city where we can have gotten some significant time? Can you carry me through how you choose what things get audited? Because I think that's important, especially when you're talking about limited resources. I think we have to kind of figure out that balance of what we're going to audit and what we're going to pass on, because it seems like everything that gets thrown at you guys are just picking it up. And that's concerning a little bit, especially with the Manning issue that you're mentioning.
Right. So how we select our audits, we do it on a risk-based. We use a risk analysis methodology to do our audit selection process. So every year we meet with all the department heads. We already have a list of what we call our auditable areas. Other audit functions call them their audit universe, but it's basically, as I indicated earlier, we have that as 147 areas that we want to look at on a cyclical basis. And every year we look at that to say, okay, how is that a higher priority this year or lower priority? And we do that based upon changes in an operation. For instance, as I indicated before, in the tax division, they just implemented a new system. They control a significant portion of the city's revenue. So we want to get in there and do that. We want to get in there and look at the QDS system and make sure that everything's running smoothly with that. So that rises right to the top as from a risk standpoint. As I indicated earlier, one of the key areas is pension payments. We're paying a lot of money. There's a lot of potential exposure for paying someone a wrong amount of money over a certain number of years. So we want to go in and take a look at that. Now, just to say that we do a report and find in that instance that things are okay, well, if something changes between now and a year or two, a system or a management or anything could happen. Someone does something that they shouldn't do. There's someone there that shouldn't be doing something or is doing something appropriately. Things could change pretty quickly. So we can't just say, oh, we looked at pension operations, they looked fine. We're not going to do those for 5 or 6 years. We really want to do, at a minimum, if it was okay, we want to be in, regardless, we want to be back in there 3 years later, at least 3 years later, because of the amount of the dollars involved there. So anyways, we do this evaluation on an annual basis, and things sort of fluctuate as far as our priorities are concerned. And we try to take care of the highest priority areas. And as a result of that, some of the other areas that we believe need attention might not necessarily be done for quite a few number of years. And we believe typically that those are the areas where you find that things can go wrong and do go wrong when they're not looked at on that cyclical basis. So it's a process that we go through to identify which ones we're going to do on a year-to-year basis, and we go through that process and then we review that with the Internal Audit Commission.
Thank you very much.
Can I
Great
just
work.
follow up on, build on that answer? So we do have the standard auditable areas, proactive. We're going out and kind of looking under rocks to make sure everything's working appropriately. And then there's also reactive audits when people make requests of the Internal Audit Commission for help on a particular issue. And so all of those things ultimately come before the Internal Audit Commission. So Mr. Campbell will bring it to our monthly meeting and say, this came in this month, how highly do we want to prioritize this new request compared to our auditable areas, standard proactive investigations. So there's a definite process to it. The team itself does a good job of kind of prioritizing, and then when there's important things, they bring them to the commission and say, look, so we got one from Council President Wooden recently, which was a very tight timeline request, and they brought it to us. And we said, yes, this is very important. We need to be responsive to the City Council and make sure that that request gets put to the top of the list, and then kind of flows back through the Internal Audit Department.
Thank you. Councilman Deutsch.
Thank you, and through the chair. I'd like to ask about some, briefly, maybe you could list about some areas with a potential, not just saving a few $100s, let's say, for pencils or clips or something, which is interesting, but hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I have wondered about for a while as to whether they would come under the purview of the office. For instance, if we have an area where we do third-party billing, let's say for some services that we provide or that we or that are provided through the city, and we can bill third parties, let's say in the health field, or let's say for ambulance service, if and when the city begins to run ambulances and then bill third parties for that service, which has been under discussion. May not happen tomorrow, but it's a potential source of revenue. So let's say in a general area of billing third parties for services rendered through the city, which potentially is a large source of income. Again, whether it be through the fire department, MHIS perhaps, or health services.
The Board of Education does some of that also through their health operations.
Fine. Okay, thank you. And so But I come back for a second to the health sector, which, as we know, is a huge expense. You mentioned pension. The pension sector is being auditable, but also, since we as a city are self-insured for health expenses, and we have an ASO, the Administrative Services Organization, just administering it, whether we have the capacity or the skill to audit our expenditures for health services on behalf of those that city covers, employees, which potentially is a huge source of savings if done correctly, and we've had Aon and some other intermediaries for health monitoring. So I wonder the extent to which the Internal Audit Commission, especially if it has more staffing, can also look into that on our behalf. The third-party billing, the revenues, which I think are potentially huge, additional ones. I'm not aware whether we've audited an operational, not so much financial operation, contract compliance, where we have, let's say, a construction firm or a utility that has certain contracts for maintenance of our streets or our provision of services. And I've been puzzled for a long time as to who monitors whether or not they comply. Whether I imagine the Corporation Council and procurement does some of that, but I didn't know if your office also gets involved in seeing if the obligations of external entities, utilities and so on and so forth, are complied with, and those are monitored on a regular basis. You see, so that's a potentially big area, contractual compliance.
Councilman Deutsch has long statements so far. Is there a question there? So they can answer, because if you get too convoluted, they won't know what to answer.
Okay, and the last one is whether another area, in addition, let's say, to health, is, let's say, the school building contracts, where, let's say, someone audits change orders and so on, and whether they are we're provided as a city and a committee with adequate justification, technical follow-through, and so on and so forth. So what areas would you say, with the current or additional staffing, are ripe for that in terms of, as you would say, a big bang for the buck?
Well, as far as contract compliance is concerned, we don't do that on a citywide basis. That we'll look at a department, and if they have contracts for services, we'll look at that when we do an individual department or a function within a department. So we look at that on a sort of a specific issue-by-issue basis, not on a global basis. So we do that already. As far as actual areas and points of revenue collection, we keep a close eye on that. Every year we're talking to people. What sources we're looking at their sources of revenue, how it's coming in, where it's coming in. So that's all on our plan. I spoke with Chief Huertas, and he mentioned, I guess, the fact that they're going to be billing for certain services or planning on doing that. So again, through that process, we get these areas. So I think, for the most part, we have all the revenue, points of revenue and areas of collection already on our plan, and we cover those, as I indicated. Those are considered to be very high priority areas, and we're looking at those on at least a 3-year cycle, if not more. So, and then a couple of the areas, just briefly, that you mentioned, contract services. Well, we can, and especially change orders. We can look at there's a procedure for change orders. People have to approve them. There's a process that they have to go through. We can do that, and we do that in our audits. As far as whether or not a change order was necessary, or they're meeting construction requirements. We're not construction experts, so that's an area that we typically haven't done. We look again at the payment process and all the other areas, ancillary areas, but we're not construction experts, so we really can't get down to that level. And the same thing to a certain degree on the health side. We do some work there, but we're not healthcare experts. I've done some in the past. I've done health-related audits in the past, and I know the deputy chief auditor that we have here at the city has done significant amount also at Cigna in his prior position. But again, that to go in and look at whether or not they're perhaps paying their claims properly, that's something we could undertake. But it's a very significant area, and that might be more appropriate to have someone actually identify a consulting group that would come in there that has the expertise, that's going to be able to know where they need to hone in on and do it. And you know, it might cost obviously more money, but they're going to be looking at what they should be looking at and doing what they need to do as far as that's concerned. And same thing on the construction side, I would say.
The last question is, and I'm not asking this for philosophical reasons or to be facetious, but I'd like to know, who audits the Audit Commission?
To my knowledge, no one.
Who audits the Audit Commission?
Or who audits you guys? Since
Yeah.
you're out there auditing departments because you believe it provides a valuable service, who audits you?
Ultimately, the Audit Commission oversees the audit department in the structure, and the Audit Commission is made up of 3 members appointed by one by the council, one by the treasurer, and one by the business community. So at the end of the day, those representatives on the commission are helping shape and drive the agenda for audits, and you know, we as commissioners have to be responsive to whoever appointed us. Well, I guess we don't necessarily have to, but in theory we should be, I guess, responsive to those who put us on the commission and making sure that we're doing our best efforts, we're making our best efforts to look after the city's you know, finances and operational well-being.
Thank you, and with that we're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you very much.